Welcome back for episode 2 of the Wellbeing a Deeper Dive campaign. We're back this year to focus on the journey that involves the process of looking inward, taking an honest self-inventory of our strengths, challenges, wiring, rewiring, framing, and reframing those inner thoughts, and really about how we see ourselves. So today we have Mr. Sean FitzPatrick and Mr. Kenneth Stalter to discuss their personal thoughts on quantifying the professional and personal lives that we all balance, and really the development of a person's best potentials and their own unique approach in the fulfillment of personally expressive, self-concordant goals. So I'm going to turn it over to our two speakers, and as always, we thank you for tuning into Legal Wellbeing in Action, and we hope you enjoy.
Thank you, Tanessa, for that introduction, and thank you, Ken, for being here on the Legal Wellbeing in Action podcast through the State Bar of New Mexico. My name is Sean FitzPatrick, and Ken and I are going to be here talking about the current wellbeing campaign, which is Wellbeing a Deeper Dive. And so we'll talk about what we call deliberate or conscious well-being choices, and what that means in terms of the consequences of choosing to be well and the practice of law. So Ken, I want to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Sean. My name is Ken Stalter. I'm a solo practitioner in Albuquerque. I focus on injury claims, insurance claims, and civil rights cases, as well as a fair number of public records cases. And that's kind of my bread and butter law practice. Other than that, my time is really consumed with family obligations. I have 3 kids, ages 7, 4, and 2. I try to give them as much of myself as I reasonably can. And beyond that, I just try to take care of myself. I'm fairly active with different physical activities, martial arts, kettlebells. I try to be deliberate and conscious in my nutrition, my sleep habits. I have an on and off meditation practice that kind of, like a balloon, when you squeeze one part, other parts pop out. I try to juggle all those things.
Yeah, and it's part of what you described is what came to mind when the State Bar of New Mexico's Wellbeing Committee was putting together speakers to present on the podcast. Is who would be someone that we could talk to about their practice of law and how that integrates to well-being. And you and I have had some conversations about that to some extent in the past. And the balloon metaphor or analogy, I find to be true, that if you squeeze too much on one area, then the other parts expand. And so one of the thoughts I have is, can I have it all? Can I practice law, be really good at it? Can I also be a family man, be good at that? And can I also have a life outside of those two things? And, what are your thoughts on that?
It depends on how you define all. There's a meme that makes the rounds on Twitter now and then about this young man who, I guess, started his career in the Navy and became a Navy SEAL, then went to medical school and is now an astronaut. And you might say he has it all.
Okay.
I'm not, if that's all, the answer is no. That guy maybe can have it. The rest of us no. But it comes down to what you define as all and what you value. Because whatever you have, you can create a definition for yourself that exceeds what you currently have. Now, some of those guys sitting there at 250 billion, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, they could be, I don't know anything about them, but it's plausible that they are consumed with getting to 300 billion or 400 billion. So having it all is more about how you relate to what you do have and how you define what you're looking for and how you relate to your own desires and wishes and values.
Okay, so let me ask this then. For you, what does that look like as far as, you setting goals? If Bezos wants 300 million, or billion, I guess, so you got 300 million. Like, how do you determine what goals to set in your practice and in your personal life and those types of things? How do you do that?
Frankly, right now, I feel like I'm often just forced by circumstance. It's hard to define a certain goal, and I'm not even sure that it's productive to define these long-term goals and set a benchmark for yourself in that way, saying, well, if I generate X in revenue for my firm this year, I'm going to be okay. Maybe not. Or if I'm in this place in 10 years, maybe not. I find it more helpful to myself to set smaller daily goals. Okay, what do I need to do today to feel like I was productive professionally, that I gave my family what they need, and that I lived as fully as I could in this day? So really what I try to do is take it day by day in that sense, without too much. I certainly have long-term goals and bigger goals.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
I try to use them more as a guiding star to define the daily goals, rather than to attach too much to the big goals. Because if my goal this year is to generate X or Y in revenue for my firm, what does that really translate to in terms of what I do today and how I partition my day or how I spend the next hour? It's almost like it's too far away to turn it into actionable goals for the present moment.
Okay. Well, let me, I guess we should touch a little bit about, this idea that, and I won't charge it in any way, negative or positive. There's an idea that all you need to do is go to bed at a time so you can get 8 hours of sleep and eat healthy and do yoga, and that's it. I guess I'm charging a little bit, but what is it like, for lawyers out there who are trying to be healthy, trying to be intentional about what they do you think that's enough? Or is there more, or is there less?
To me, what I would tell those lawyers is stop worrying about whether XYZ is quote unquote enough, because that just begs the question, how are you defining enough? A way I've heard it put that I think is more productive to living a full life is looking at, do your commitments, whether it's a financial commitment or a time commitment or any other responsibility that you've set out for yourself, do your commitments match your convictions? Meaning your values and what you value in life, in your relationships with others, in your practice, in your physical existence, or in your mental or spiritual existence, and the resources you devote to different things within those realms. Do they reflect what you value? And if not, then reconfigure. So I don't know if it's helpful to say, is checking these boxes of XYZ enough? Maybe for one person it is, if that's what they've defined and set out for themselves.
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts about that. The first is, at some point, sometimes your values change, right? And I think about how when you and I used to work together at the DA's office, and I had a suggestion box, often one of the suggestions in the box was, consider your life choices. And it was funny, but also true, right? Sometimes you need to consider and reconsider what your values are and whether whether your commitments match those values. So let me ask this, I want to go back to, the eating right and the working out and those types of things. Do you think, I'm of the opinion somewhat that yes, you absolutely need to do those things, maybe not all the time, but that you need to have the fundamentals in place, just like math. You can't do multiplication until you can do addition. You can't, you can't focus on a deeper well-being until you have the basic well-being. What are your thoughts about that?
I'm not sure if I understand what you mean by the difference between a basic well-being and a deeper well-being.
Maslow's hierarchy, or Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So you gotta be fed, and you gotta be safe in your home. You gotta be, all those basic needs met before you can get, higher level functioning.
Sure. I do believe that the mind-body connection is much deeper than our society tends to give credit to. And that if you are not taking care of your body and living to some standard of health, it is going to be much more difficult to feel well and to be emotionally and mentally healthy.
I agree with that. I 100% agree with that. If I work out in the morning, I feel better the whole day. You've already accomplished that one thing. So at least you've done that. Even if I go to work and I don't get anything done, at least I've worked out. Okay. Well, let me switch it a little bit and ask about what you have found as far as over the course of your career, has worked or hasn't worked for you, and what people tell you as far as you need to do this or you need to do that.
Do you mean in terms of professional growth, or you mean in terms of health,
both,
well-being?
Because I think they're tied together, right? At least according to the ABA nowadays, is professional identity is part of well-being for lawyers. So are there things that you have encountered that people have said you have to do this and you found that not to be true, or people have said you don't have to do this? I'm being very vague.
I will give a shout out here to someone I worked with in the appellate division of the Attorney General's office, Joel Jacobson, and he writes for the Albuquerque Journal sometimes, so check out his articles. He told me once that if you are looking for what we might call in this conversation professional well-being, there's really three components to it, or three broad aspects to it. And he said autonomy, competence, and purpose. So purpose being that you believe in what you are doing, you believe that it somehow makes a difference in the world, and that, put simply, what you are doing matters. Competence is the sense that what you are doing is something that you are good at, and that you are getting better at it, and that you can do things and you can affect change and do good work. And then autonomy is the ability or capacity to self-direct to a large degree. He said those are the major three ingredients to a fulfilling career. And in my experience, I found that to be true.
Okay. I think I agree with that, although, putting in autonomy, can there be too much where you don't know, you have so much choice that you don't know where to go or what to do. What do you do? I mean, for new attorneys starting out, and for those who are just starting on their own practice, sometimes the fact that they have so many choices can be overwhelming to them. Do you have any thoughts about how they can structure that better or be better prepared?
Different people have different levels of comfort with being self-directed. Either the capacity to do it or the enjoyment of it. Some people feel more comfortable and confident when they're being overseen by others. That's fine. I would say to young people coming into the profession, you're just going to have to experiment with different roles and different working environments to find the level of autonomy and self-direction that feels right to you. And as you increase in competence, you're likely going to be more comfortable with a higher level of autonomy. It was certainly my experience. As a new attorney 15 years ago, not really understanding much of anything about how law really works, any degree of autonomy was intimidating because it really carried the prospect of severe failure. So it was helpful to be in a structure where people were checking the work and overseeing. And as you gain competence, maybe you become more comfortable with greater autonomy. But even if you don't, that's okay. Some people like to work in highly structured environments, have clear goals, clear expectations that are defined from outside. And if that is your personality and your work style, great, go for it. So it's a question of knowing yourself and knowing what level is right for you.
Yeah, okay. I think that kind of brings me back around to what we started talking about at the beginning, which is, making decisions with knowledge of or acceptance of the consequences. And so, and as that relates to well-being, not a lot of people think of watching TV as a way to enhance your well-being. But for some people, that de-stress time or that I don't have to think about anything time can be beneficial. But at what cost if that show you're going to watch is 11 o'clock at night and you're staying up all night to watch it, at what cost are you doing these things? And so that's a roundabout way of saying, what are there decisions you had to make in where you spend your time and well-being that have been helpful, that have been hurtful, and how do you make those decisions when maybe the consequences aren't readily apparent?
It comes from experience, right? By having made different choices and tried out different things in different circumstances, you get a sense of what the consequences of a given choice are. And that's kind of the process of maturing as a person. When you're young, you have a lot of choices, but not much experience with which to evaluate the consequences of those choices.
Yeah.
As you get older and your life circumstances change and you take on more responsibilities, the perceived range of choices significantly narrows for many of us. At the same time, the knowledge of the consequences of different paths increases. So you have fewer choices, but a better idea of where those choices might lead you.
That kind of reminds me of the story about the guru that someone went to go see, and you get to ask the guru one question, and he asks the question, what's the secret of life? And the guru says, good judgment. And what kind of answer is that? You're not telling me, how do you get good judgment? And the guru says, bad judgment. So I guess, how do you get that good judgment without the bad judgment? Is there a way to figure out, healthy choices without having made those, I guess you call them bad choices, but maybe they're just, poorly thought out choices.
Well, it's the advantage of humans being social creatures, right?
Okay,
We can surround ourselves with positive examples and negative
that's true.
examples, because although everyone's different, certain choices are going to affect people generally the same. I mean, it goes back to evolution. Like, how did we find out which foods are edible?
Not everybody ate the poison, right?
There were the risk-seeking people who would try new foods,
Yeah.
and some of them didn't make it, but the rest of us got to learn which ones to avoid.
But some people like spicy food, and maybe it's really hot for. Anyways, I hear what you're saying. So observe.
Observe yourself and observe those around you.
Okay. Be conscious of it.
Yes.
Okay. Well, before I approached you about asking, doing this podcast, what were your thoughts about, well-being, and, is that something you intentionally pursue, or is that just something, like you said, you work out and, you try and meditate? Are those things that you learned about on your own, or did someone say, hey, you should do this, or here's what I do? How did you get involved in that?
I mean, there's so many information streams in today's world, as well as people I talk to, media. I actually don't remember how I got into a lot of these things, nor am I particularly engaged with the term well-being as an umbrella term, because it seems a little vague to me, and I'm not sure exactly what it encompasses. The best I understand it is that it's a holistic approach to physical, mental, and spiritual health,
Okay.
and that you are fundamentally living the life that you want to live. I guess that's how I would define well-being. It's living the life that you want to live.
Okay, but so I get a little frustrated sometimes when people are like, live your best life. Are you living your best life? And part of me thinks to myself, well, no, I hope this isn't the best life I could possibly live. I mean, some life out there in the multiverse or infinite different realities, there's probably a better one, right? So what do you?
Well, the term best implies a value judgment.
Okay.
And that might be the problem with what you're reacting to in that phrase, is that if you say something is the best, it implies that other things are worse. Now, maybe you could say on the margins, there are some things that are objectively better or worse ways to live.
Mhm.
But what are we really talking about? What is the metric there? Are we saying morally? Are we saying ethically?
I don't know.
Spiritually? Longevity?
Maximum fun?
I don't know. Income? I mean, wealth? Tax deductions? So that's why I think it might be more helpful to phrase it. Are you living the life that you want to live?
Okay.
Now, that takes a certain dose of realism, right?
Yes.
That you have to, your expectations have to somehow cohere to the opportunities that are available to you.
Yeah.
Now, it's very easy to have this conversation as attorneys in the United States,
Yeah.
right? Where we have income that for many of us as attorneys is top quarter of the US, top 10% of the US, which puts probably in the global 1%.
Yeah.
So it's very,
We're comfortable in our
very
offices.
comfortable to talk about, oh, the life I want to live.
Yeah.
But it is, I think, something to think about, at least as a direction, defining where you are, not necessarily something that's so far away. That's my ideal, but where am I today? Where do I want to be tomorrow?
Yeah, but that's I think I'm getting is there's trade-offs, right? There's your best life overall maybe best, but there's definitely trade-offs. Like right now, could I be working more to make more money instead of doing a podcast? Or could I be doing something else that raises up that attribute of my best life?
Here's the thing. We have to contemplate the possibility that our best life went out the door the moment we went to law school. So I say, accept the reality of your present circumstances.
Okay.
And
Okay. All right.
like, if you look at me being born in 1982 and chart out this child's best life,
Yeah.
I don't know if it necessarily would have included becoming a lawyer. But I did, and it's okay. It's fine.
Okay.
We'll make the best of where we are now, which does entail a lot of advantages.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's interesting to hear you say that, because when I look at you on paper, you're Cornell undergrad, Harvard law, like the cream of the crop type places where people go when they want to live their best life. So it's to me, when I look at that on paper, I'm like, Ken is living his best life. If somebody asks me how Ken is doing, I'm like, Ken is he's doing the best he can. He runs his own business. He's got a wonderful family. He's successful. He's so that's what
That's why you got to get out of the game of comparing yourself to others, because I can look at other people who went to those schools and be like, oh, Ken didn't do the senior thesis in college, so he didn't get honors. In law school, got a B- in civil procedure and didn't make law review. He didn't do a federal clerkship.
Okay, all right.
And like, there are classmates who I went to, who have all those things on their resume. The people who did the honors thesis in undergrad and then did their 2 years in Oxford, then went to law school and were on law review and did the federal court appellate clerkship. And now they work at the Solicitor General's office or some big firm. Like, you got to get out of that game, because there's always going to be someone with a better resume. And if you invest your happiness in pursuing those accolades or lines on your resume, you may find that you get there and it's actually empty.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. I'll never forget when I was doing those goal setting things about, I want this amount of revenue for my firm, or I want to resolve this level of case. And then when it happened and you meet that goal and you're just left with now what? I'm not, I still drive a Kia. I still, I still have to pay taxes and whatever. My life is not materially different. So I've reached my goal, and I know it at least doesn't feel like anything about my life has changed.
It might come back to what we were talking about in terms of purpose. Now, you set those goals for yourself, if it's a revenue goal or whatever, you define that, and that becomes your purpose. And while you have that purpose, it feels good, because it is a purpose, and that you can make progress towards it, and that feels good. But then when you meet it, your purpose is gone.
Yeah.
And so that part of your well-being has dropped out.
It reminds me of something you mentioned about the gamification of exercise, and how, like, you tick a box and you do this thing, and there's all these apps out there, and that can be helpful to get you started. For me, it's not so helpful, because I start and then I don't necessarily finish. But I do think that you have to internalize that purpose, whatever it is, and the gamification of it can help internalize it. But if it doesn't get internalized, if it doesn't take, then it's not necessarily helpful. Well, I feel like we're touching a lot of different subjects, but are there any topics that you wanted to touch on as far as what it means to kind of look beyond just the sugar-coated well-being things that, by this point, most people know? right? We've all been told, eat well, get sleep, you know.
So you're talking about the idea that the state bar is concerned about a deeper dive
Yes.
into wellness or well-being. Part of the component to me, in my experience, having tried a lot of different things to take care of myself, when you look at those box checking things, this amount of sleep, this exercise, this nutrition, there's the things you need to do, and then there's how you relate to those things.
What do you mean?
So I can choose to excitedly and joyously wake up early in the morning and do my exercise.
Can you choose that? Can you choose
You
that?
can set yourself up to have that choice available to you.
Okay.
Or even if you begrudgingly go to exercise and let yourself get into it, you might experience some joy once you're there. When I say it's about how you relate to these things, what I'm saying is just watch yourself and make sure you are not resenting what you are doing. If you resent the fact that you have to exercise, possibly you are better off not exercising. If you tell yourself, I have to do XYZ, and you resent the fact that you have to do XYZ, maybe you shouldn't do it, because that internalization of resenting having to do these things might outweigh the positive, possibly. I don't know. But resentment is very damaging to your well-being, in my experience.
But give it a chance, right? I mean, because I definitely resent having to wake up at 6 a.m, get out of bed and do the exercise I do. But when I'm feeling that particular resentment that day, which is most days, I say to myself, I remind myself why I'm doing it. And that is because move it or lose it. Motion is lotion. If you don't continue to move your body through time and space, maybe you won't be able to if you are sedentary for 20 years, So I remind myself why I'm doing it, even though I resent it.
Are you able to let go of the resentment once you feel some endorphins?
Yes, absolutely. Once the endorphins start flowing, that's all I'm focused on is the exercise and how I feel in that moment.
And now, do you feel like you resent kind of the inconvenience or because it can feel bad to get up in the morning. There's a difference between kind of the mild resentment of, oh, I got to get up and do this, and the deeper resentment, I think maybe connects to this idea of wanting to have it all, is resenting the rules of the game that we've been put into.
Yes, I think it's that, and there's some term for that where it's like where people particularly in countries that are, I can't remember which countries they are, but like where they're working very hard and they're working very long hours, and they resent it that when they get home they have to go to bed because they got to get up. And so they stay and use their phones or late into the night because that's their free time and they want to reclaim it, and it's almost like a resentment, and they're only punishing themselves. So I think it's that for me, because the time in the morning I want to myself, but I know I only have a limited amount of time and I better go get my workout in.
Yeah, it's not for me to judge anyone's reaction to their own particular circumstances. I just say, in my experience, if you are resentful towards the rules of the game that we've been put into, then you're causing yourself suffering and damaging your well-being. Meaning it may sting to turn down dessert. Okay. It may feel good to eat dessert. You want to make that choice. What is damaging, perhaps, is the attitude of, I shouldn't have to turn this down in order to achieve whatever other goal I'm going for, fitness-wise, weight-wise, health-wise. The idea that I shouldn't be presented with this choice. So there's the choice. If within the matrix that you've set out for yourself, this dessert is worth it, go for it. And do so joyously, do so boldly. If you're gonna turn it down, do so and be happy with that. But if that is the choice that we are presented with, what is resentment? The type of resentment I'm talking about is the resentment that comes from, it is unfair that I am presented with this choice.
Yeah, no.
Now, I limit this discussion to the context of what we are on this podcast about, attorneys and professionals thinking about making lifestyle choices as far as health and well-being and so on. I would not apply this principle of acceptance towards, injustices in society and that sort of thing. I think it's a different question when there are moral and philosophical.
We're talking about cake.
Yeah, we're talking about cake. We're not talking about oppression.
No, I hear you on the cake issue, and it makes me think, like, if you're gonna eat the cake, eat it and enjoy it. Don't think about, well, maybe that's not the way.
Well, no, I think that's
the
exactly it. That's the flip side.
Yeah.
The other side of that coin,
Right.
is if you're gonna eat it, don't berate yourself for having done so. Don't shame yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's the other side of it.
Yeah.
If you turn it down, don't resent the fact that you have to turn it down. If you eat it, don't shame and guilt yourself for having done so.
Yeah. Make the choice.
And make the choice and accept yourself whichever way you've gone. Now, if you think you're not making good choices, is maybe some things you can do, cognitive behavioral therapy, to work out how you're approaching those moments when you're presented with these healthy or unhealthy choices, however you want to define them.
Yeah.
You've got to accept yourself and make sure that what you're doing, what I come back to, do your commitments match your convictions?
Yeah.
Because it comes down to values.
Yeah. I think that's probably a good place for us to stop, at least on this podcast. For those of you listening, be sure to tune into Legal Wellbeing in Action next month, wherever you get your podcasts. And then, Ken, I want to thank you for coming on this podcast and sharing your insights. I know that I always appreciate the insights that you give to these topics. And if you want any parting words for those who are listening out there.
Thank you, Sean. What's the Garrison Keillor sign off? Be well, do good work, keep in touch.
Yeah, I think that works. All right, thank you.
Thank you for listening. This episode was produced by the State Bar of New Mexico's Wellbeing Committee and the New Mexico Judges and Lawyers Assistance Program. All editing and sound mixing was done by Blue Sky eLearn. Intro music is by Gil Flores. The views of the presenters are that of their own and are not endorsed by the State Bar of New Mexico. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, or legal advice. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition.